setup. But hey, welcome to Disc Week News. This is episode 2. Still working out the hiccups. This is a fully self-produced and written and all of that good stuff podcast. So it's literally just me. So you'll see me kind of wandering around, looking around. I am doing my absolute best while maintaining this thing as a self-producer. I'm clicking around, I'm doing the research, all that good stuff. This week was the MVPs Open at Austin presented by Flight Factory Discs. It was one of the more talked about events, at least on and around this, that I've seen in a long time. There's a lot to talk about, right? So all right, I think we'll just start kind of in order. This is part of the podcast I need to figure out a little bit better, is getting my structure under control. Maybe just a little bit more than I currently am. I did more than last week. So the goal is to, improve the podcast every day, or at least every week. Get my chats out of the way and up and running. It is available on YouTube if somebody wants to make sure my YouTube chat is working. Test. Like I said, we gotta kind of self-produce while we're at it. Austin. So if you don't want anything spoiled, if you haven't seen the Austin stuff, this is not the podcast for you. We're talking about the weekend. We're talking about everything that happened. We're not just talking about the tournament in general. I do a lot of course analytics, all that kind of stuff. So the winner for MPO, we had Nicolas Antala. I hope I'm saying his name correctly. I'm probably not. And then the winner of the FPO, we had Holland Hanley. Now let me go back to my notes and get everything under control. So we'll start with MPO. I think that's a good way to do it. Let's get my screens under. There you go. Now you can see it. So cool. I'm just making sure that my full screen still worked just fine. So we are... Oh, I didn't realize it had the playoff section a little separate now. That's nice. It used to be set up a little bit different than that. All right. So we had Nicolas take it down. Obviously, he did it in a playoff. And he was up against Kyle Klein. It was a weird weekend. I think I've said that already. But in the way that the courses, I don't know how they were set up for everybody or with who in mind. I remember last year they had the ladies play at Sprinkle Valley, and it seemed like it played okay. And then this year was the first time the MPOs played it. I feel like they extended a couple of the tees, all that good jazz. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about the winners, Nicolas. Or let's talk about the MPO a little bit. I got to keep myself on track a little bit. If you didn't pay attention, Nicolas did win back-to-back. He is Finnish Cowboy, I think is what everybody's calling him, which is hilarious. And hearing him say it is just as funny because you would expect a Texan to say something like that, and he's very clearly not. I believe he's 23 years old, so cool to see younger talent like that taking it down, especially 2 years in a row. I can try to miss any chats because I know I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. And he did some specific things really well, which is why he won. We're going to talk about MPO, FPO stats for now. I think he had the best fairway percentage of the week. I'll have to check, and we will in a second. But 1046 rated round to start it out at Sprinkle, 1075, 1042. I was wondering what it was going to say for the playoff. That tabs, I think, new. So 1061 tournament took it down. It's pretty normal, I think. Around 1060 is going to at least keep you in contention. Finnish Cowboys back. This is very much a visual podcast, by the way. So I'm sorry if you're listening. I'm not going to have this quite up on audio services yet because I really want to focus on the visual part. Get that nice and clean, and then I'll start throwing it on the audio stuff. Kyle Klein, second place, also 34 down, It's so funny seeing how the ratings average out different. So technically Niklas shot a 1 point better rated tournament, just the way averages work. Gannon almost came back, which was insane to watch. His 1074, what round was he 1074? Yeah, he shot a 1074 rated round to almost bring it back, which is just nutty on that division. Paul McBeast, I think he had the hot round on the weekend as far as ratings go. His third round was 1095 rated, which is nuts, which basically means if your propagator shoots one worse, then potentially he shot an 1100 rated round. 12 down at, this was Harvey Pinnock? Yeah, round 3. So Harvey Pinnock was round 3 for the guys. The golf course is what I'll go ahead and say. We'll call it. Goes to show that you don't need to throw far. Yeah, especially at these courses, because these courses aren't too long. Like I said, we'll talk about the course here in a little bit. We're just going over like player stats at the moment. Let's go over, not cards. Stats. All stats, baby. This is how we figure out who won, who did the best, maybe what other people can work on. Not exactly a perfect system. I know that they kind of have volunteers doing most of this stuff. We appreciate it. But, if they're a little off on everybody, that means everybody's on the same playing field as far as stat accuracy, which is fine with me. Niklas had a 50% birdie rating, which is nuts. And 6% bogey rating. Not bad. All right, let's just go down the line as far as like best stats of the weekend for the guys. Adam Hammes had the top birdie rate, but I think he had a couple big holes that really set him back. We're not too worried about these. I mean, it's funny, you can see like the top 5 players here are all gonna be in like best bogey percentage, best double bogey percentage, all that good stuff. Parked was AB, which I don't think surprises me very much, but his C1 in regulation was only 53%. That's gonna hurt. Hard to what did AB have? Strokes gained putting. Only 2-2. So still a top 5 finish. Hard to be mad at. Let's look at who had the most strokes gained putting. Ezra Aderhold was the top putter of the weekend. I actually did know. He made a post about it, which is cool to see. He's just got to get a couple things under control, and he will be better off. He was only 12 out of 19 on the fairway the last round. I don't think his fairway percentage was exactly stellar in comparison, but he still had a top 25 finish and best putting, so he had 12 strokes. It was like a lot. 12 strokes compared to 8.6 in second place, which was our guy, Andrew Marweed. And Casey White was up there with also strokes gains. And Kevin Jones. Good to see. A lot of names. Paul McBeast, looks like he was 5th or 6th. Strokes gained putting. Who had gained C2? Gavin Babcock. Also a name you don't see or maybe correlate with putting all the time. It's cool to see. Paul was saying this. Yes, Paul was playing the same level as his normal Midwest swing. I've talked about it before. Everybody last year was talking about like, oh, McBeast's washed, blah, 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 blah. But like, it's a bunch of people who don't realize that he tore his labrum. He kind of went into surgery and recovery late. Torn labrums can take like 2 years to actually fully recover. So seeing him shoot that 1095 rated round makes me really hopeful that maybe this year he pulls down that next major he's looking for. Where are we at? Oh, nope. Oops. I'm clicking before I read it. Strokes gained C1X, Paul Kranz. That's awesome. And obviously Ezra there. Now Tee to Green, this is probably the big stuff. Kyle Klein and Niklas. Tee to Green and C2 are like the 2 most important stats, I think, as far as MPO. Like when you excel at those things, you're hard to beat. So the top 3 guys were all top 3 Tee to Green, which doesn't surprise me. I'm just curious, who had the longest throw in? Albert Tom. Nice. Total putting. Casey White at 1,400 feet putting, which is hard to, I think we all saw the GIF of where AB was tapping it in, and then the screenshot showed it was a 20-foot putt. So that stat's kind of hard to keep track of or keep right. let's see, C1X putting, Ezra, we saw 35 out of 36, which is so good. C2 regulation, Andrew Presnell. And C1, Nicholas. So C1 reg means when they land there. C2 and reg, which means when they land there in regulation, when you're expected to. So, and then I'm pretty sure if it's a par 4, it's how likely you are to land in C2 off of your second throw. So if I'm wrong there, feel free to correct me. I don't have all of the definitions absolutely correct, but that's why we're doing it. We're learning. Check my notes. The signs of McBeast, we talked about that. So one of my big issues, I think, for the weekend was that I don't like that they had the guys play hole 18, like the very end, and then the playoff, you restarted hole 18. And this is a great example. Like, Nicholas laced it his first time, and he did it again because he's like, I know exactly what I need to do. So I personally prefer it on playoffs if they had, like, okay, they played 18. They figure out, okay, we have to have a playoff. Now, maybe we think about 1, 2, 17, 18, like that kind of loop. 1, 2, 7, 8. You don't even have to go to 18 if you're like, or have to go to 1. If you're on 18 and for some reason hole 4 is closer, great. Do hole 4, 5, 17, 18. Like those types of like 3 to 4 hole loops. I don't like the idea of playing hole 18 and then going back to hole 18. I think it just gives a weird advantage. It's kind of boring because we just saw the hole played. Obviously it depends on the hole and everything. Like, had they done it at Sprinkle Valley, that could have been nuts. But we'll talk about Sprinkle Valley, I promise. That's just my opinion on, I don't like the idea of them starting on their playoff on the hole they just played. Just a weird look. And it feels funky. My maybe 800 rated take. I don't know how I feel about that take yet, but that was my gut reaction after watching them play hole 18, then turn around and go back and play it again. All right. Now we get into the meat and potatoes of kind of what everybody's talking about. Holland Hanley won in her home state. This is, I think, her first DGPT win in her home state, which is cool to see. She has averaged a 1.6 placement this year. So there's already talks about like potential player of the year stuff because she went second, first. Pretty great way to start the season. She did not play great her last round. Let's pull up some lady stats before I start, spiraling, because I'm sure I'm going to spiral at some point in this episode because I got a lot of weird opinions and a lot of them are contradicting. I'm aware that I can argue against myself because I like to look at the devil's advocate and figure out what's viable about it. It's a thing I like to do. So you're going to hear me maybe, like I said, contradict myself, but I'll state clearly before I start my rant what my intentions are. The 1 second. We got the stats pulled up already. Cool. Now, sorry, 1 second. Not sponsored. All right. Amateur, should have done that before starting the podcast. One thing I got to figure out is a little bit better way to pull up our chats. There we go. Because when I pull up my notes, it closes my chats, which is amateur hour on my part. Sorry. Here we are. Holland Hanley. She won. She was 1 down on the weekend, which is very different compared to what we had at Waco. It's like, okay, I'm trying really hard not to start the spiral already because we're gonna spiral. I can feel it. Let's just check out our main stats. Let's do that. Let's talk about stats because I can keep on track there. Strokes gained putting, Taylor Chechik, which is sick seeing Taylor. So everybody was kind of talking about, like, I heard last week somebody comparing her to like an athletic Evelina or something like that. That may have not been their exact quote, but it was like sporty Evelina or something, because Taylor was a Division I track athlete. Like, she is the real deal. She's also taller than you think. She was strokes gained putting, which is great. again, just to kind of see, I'm curious to where she was on tee to green, because if she starts throwing well, everybody's in trouble. Oh no, I'm not seeing her name yet, and I've scrolled a little bit too far. Okay, so she was, yeah, she was, strokes gained putting was -3, so she lost tee to green, which, like I said, tee to green is going to be one of the more important stats on tour. But I think if she gets her throwing under control, maybe on a more wide open course, she might excel a little bit better. We'll see. We'll see. Strokes gained C2 was Jessica Weiss at 2.72. Strokes gained C1X is 4.58 with Own. I don't think anybody's surprised that Own is probably going to be mentioned a lot as far as the strokes gained putting. Just checking to make sure none of these other stats are kind of worth mentioning. So strokes gained tee to green, Evelina Salonen. And then Own Scoggins. Not a super long course, so I guess that makes sense. You usually don't see Own gained on tee to green. Usually her fairway hits are really high. Ella Hansen, nobody should be surprised on tee to green there. Missy also had 2.3. But Evelina, she just lost 3.6 strokes, and, well, actually, in general, she just lost 4 strokes gained putting. But, you know, maybe she'll have another one where she has like 16 strokes gained tee to green and she'll win Worlds again. You can't count her out because we watched it happen last year. It was wild to see that. And then let me get back to who our winners were. Who had the bogey rate? Who had the lowest bogey rate? Chantel, Rebecca, Own, Silva, dummy, Silver. Who am I? All right, and then, so here's what happened. And we're going to just full on ignore the Sprinkle Valley thing until I talk about course stats here in a minute. Everybody wants to say that Holland tried to throw it away, and I don't think that's necessarily a false thing to say. She shot like a 942 rated last round. I think she was like 6 to 8 strokes ahead of Kristen before getting into the round, the final round. I can actually tell you right now, if only there was a thing in front of me that I could literally click to show me round 3. 6 strokes. Okay, 6 strokes. So she had 6 strokes on Kristen, which is scary because if Kristen just shoots her rating, then, and Holland shoots her rating, then there's only going to be like 2 to 3 strokes that she really has on her. So if Kristen shoots 3 better than her average, she wins. If Holland shoots 3 worse than her average, she's going to lose. And it was really close up until the very end, right? Holland was, I think she only had 2 OB strokes the last round. Kristen had 4. So that's what did it. And seeing Kristen throw OB is weird. She doesn't throw OB very often. So with 4 OB strokes, I mean, that's 2, right? Keep it in bounds. Maybe you get a birdie instead of a bogey. That's 2 strokes on 1 OB stroke. So it's like everybody wants to start blaming hole 18 to Sprinkle Valley, which I get it. But even if Kristen just shot her rating, she would have won the final round. So you can't just blame the first 2 days of the tournament. So, like I said, everybody was saying that Holland was trying to throw it away. I get it, why you're saying that. I've heard people say that Kristen threw it away. But no, I think Kristen blew it. And I say that affectionately. Kristen's one of my favorite players. She just blew the opportunity to win because she could have. Holland wasn't doing her job as the leader to keep the lead, and Kristen just didn't catch up. And the rest of the field just didn't quite have that advantage as far as strokes gained. So, like, Holland the last round had 3 double bogeys. 3 double bogeys, 3 regular bogeys. And Kristen just shot a 981 rated round, which is, I didn't check exactly what the strokes were as far as what the difference was on rating. So this is a terrible place to check this. Let's see. 1 stroke. 1 stroke was 8 points-ish, rating-wise. So let's see. It if Kristen shot her rating that last round, it would have been 2.5 strokes ish. That's it. That's what happened. Kristen just didn't pull through on the last round, which is weird to see from Kristen. But even saying that she didn't play to her potential, she still got second place and almost won it. That just shows how far above everyone Kristen is at the moment. Not that people don't have those weird potential spikes to get up and catch with her. Just Kristen's lows are much higher than most other people's lows. Her standard deviation's incredibly low, while her ceiling is still very high, where everyone else kind of has a wider standard deviation, which lowers their average course rating scoring. So, Alex, you're way too nice. So, this is more of for the nerds, right? And I'm totally okay with that. What's my next point? We're going to talk about, NordVPN. I have to have it open in order to stream on TikTok. It's a weird thing. And Kristen Lott, she got second, almost on my comeback. Just checking my notes. Sorry, just checking my notes. Okay, let's go. We'll do some course analytics, and then we'll kind of wrap up the podcast with the, the fun course stuff about FPO and the drama that happened with it. But the last round was rough to watch for the ladies. It was just mistake after mistake. It wasn't exciting golf, but I think it's because there were two people racing for second, right? It wasn't a race for first. It was like a race for second, which is unfortunate, which we've seen before on all sides of the course. So let's check out our course stats. This is where things get funky. I wish I could average the days together. And I understand you can't really do that because like weather and all that stuff, but like just give me the option on here, like round 3 and 4, put those stats together. That way I could combine all the information, but oh well. Let's see, we're going to start MPO. I like to do round 2, round 4, especially when the weather is comparable at both of them. I think they were fairly close in weather. The first day, everything's weird. Everybody's kind of getting like travel days and all that stuff. So I don't like to look at round 1. I like to look at the second day they play a course. I think it's a little bit more telling of how a course plays. Let's see, none? Hold on. There were 0 holes where 60% or more of the field took the same score for MPO on round 2. I'm just going to check round 1. 1 hole where 60% of the field or more took the same score, which is awesome. That shows really good scoring separation. For example, at Waco, there were 6 to 8 holes where 60% of the field took the same score, whether or not it's 60% of the field took a par or 60% of the field took a birdie. I need to probably have the information up on distances on the courses. I feel like it should just tell me here. Wait, that's not a clickable link, so that does me no good. Okay. And let's see, what was the easiest hole? Hole 6, yeah, 320 footer. That makes sense. For MPO, 320 footer should be just stock. I think that was the kind of skippy shot around the corner. Oh no, it was the slight backhand turnover. So this is like how every hole at Waco was. There were like 3 holes at Waco that are similar to this hole, and I think that's why like you're almost warmed up for it. But Waco had a little more elevation change, I think, than Sprinkle Valley. The hardest hole, don't think is going to surprise anybody, was hole 18. Wow, that's crazy. Nobody saw that coming, with 110 OB strokes the second day. How many OB strokes did it have the first day? 84. I think the wind may have shifted, like day 1, it was a little bit more of a tailwind or right to left, and then I think it was a little bit more of a headwind on day 2 for the guys, which makes sense. The 47% double bogey or worse. Ouch. Ouch, ouch. So 65% of the men took a bogey. There was a 1% parked on day 2 for hole 18. That's brutal. Like I said, I'll get into my feelings on hole 18 here shortly. I'm just going over all the stats for the courses in general. But I think to kind of sum up Sprinkle Valley, I think it's a solid course, especially as far as scoring separation goes. It's not crazy long, but there's definitely opportunities to throw a couple bombs on the back 9. And I think where people always say like, oh, we don't have the opportunity to throw far, but like when you're of the elite level, when you have the ability to throw a mid-range in a wooded course as far as someone else who has to throw a fairway to reach something, you have an advantage because mid-ranges and putters are just so much more consistent on ground play. So just in general, when people complain about, oh, there's not any like wide open holes for them to bomb. Okay, sure, I understand that take, but you have to see that they still have an advantage throwing in the woods when they can throw a mid-range 360 feet, where maybe some of the lower tier pros have to throw a fairway driver to get that far. So there's still an advantage to being able to throw far when you're in the woods. Granted, far doesn't equate to accurate, I understand. Thanks for the likes and shares on TikTok, I appreciate it. The second hardest hole, what was that? The par 4 that turned around the corner. Oh, that one was kind of like that weird flip up forehand, and then I think the last part of it was really, really guarded. But it had an 8% double bogey rate and only a 12%. So just a lot of people took a par. I mean, only 630 feet, but it's in the woods. 7 OB strokes. Where's the OB on that hole? Oh, to the right and beyond. Okay, so people may have blasted it past. Okay, let's talk about Harvey Pinnock. I'll just go to the last round because I think, like I said, stats are a little better the second day they play a course in a row because people have their games a little bit more on lock. Let's see, how many holes did we have? 73% birdie rate on hole 10. Oh, it doesn't give me a... Oh, there it is. Just took a second to load. So there. I don't know if that helps you guys, but maybe it'll give you a little visual there on what hole I'm talking about as I'm talking about. 310 feet. Oh, it was that island hole. That's right. So yeah, 73% birdie rate. I can almost guarantee you they're going to make that harder next year. It averaged 0.7 under par per par 3. So they're going to do something funky to make that harder. Whether or not the drop zone's harder to maybe force more bogeys. But that's cool. The only 2 holes, it looks like, where 60% of 3 holes where 60% of the field or more had the same score on Harvey Pinnock, which is great. I think if it's under that like 5, maybe 4 metric, that's where I start to lean like, okay, it's a good course as far as scoring separation for the pros. In my metric, like I said, personally, is when 60% of the field takes the same score. Now, in the future, it might be 50%. Maybe we want even more scoring separation going forward. But since Waco had, like I said, it was like 6 to 8, depending on the field and which day it was. 6 to 8 holes played 60% of the field as the same score, which, in my opinion, is not great as far as scoring separation goes. What was the hardest hole for Harvey Pinnock the last day? Really? Hole 2. I like hole 2 a lot. I think that weird little OB hole in the middle really throws people through a loop, but in a good way. I liked the tee under the bridge. It was interesting. I think Ezra mentioned they did that to stop AB from going over the top or somebody from going over the top. It may have been Simon. Excuse me. They got the PDGA waiver. I like that they put that on the signs. The 7% bogey rate, or 7% double bogey rate, so not bad. 13 OB strokes, so it was a little higher on that one. It's always interesting when the hardest hole has not the most OB strokes. It had actually the fourth most OB strokes. So it just had a lot of pars and a couple bogeys because I think, did that middle island play as hazard? I can't. Oh, hey, I didn't know I could do that. This is lovely. So now when I talk about it, we can do this. So no, that middle is not OB. The only hazard were those like little ditches over to the left where I think that's where those trees were. Traditional golf bunkers. Okay, never mind. So the tree thing I think was that OB section up at the top. Don't get discs that come to rest in the creek bed. That's funny. What was the easiest hole? Did we already talk about the easiest hole? Yeah, we did. The island. Makes sense. It's a small island too. Like it's smaller than Circle 2. Mostly. Which brings me to a fantastic point. Let's talk about that. Some of the MPOs complained about the, island for hole 18 at Sprinkle. This is a 310-foot shot. I think it's uphill too. 300, unless I'm thinking of the wrong hole, but 310 feet regardless to an island that's barely bigger than Circle 1, if we're being honest. Like your real landing zone. I guess you could land it short, but and 73% of the field birdied it. But people were complaining that the square on Harvey Pinnock, which was like Circle's, I think it was bigger than Circle, was too hard of a shot, and it was only like 175 feet. I need both hands. I think a 10 went downhill. It totally may have been. I think I'm mixing it up with this trail up here. The hole I'm thinking of, let me run through these holes real quick. The hole I'm thinking of had that trail that went up. Top down's always funky, right? There was the path on the left, and then there was a bunch of OB. It wasn't even OB. They didn't make it OB this year. That's what I'm messed up on. It had over on the right side of the hole, there was like basically rough because it was so gross. I think these maps are just messing with my head. It might be this hole. I think this, maybe. That's not uphill. Anyways, more or less, I think you guys know what I'm talking about. It's one of the holes where it's like going up and then over on the right side where people would try to go spike hyzer. Oh, it's the one where the spotter got hit twice in a row, which one of the cameramen on site got on the Reddit post and said that woman never got hit. So, Ben, don't worry. When I talk about Sprinkle, I am definitely going to pull up the disc golf maps guy. Because he has the best map and it will help me explain some of my points. So let's go to the FPO course stats. We'll start at Sprinkle. Now, we can kind of get into the point here, or kind of get into how I feel about the course. This is a great MPO course and maybe not the best FPO course. I think that's why in the Mint Discs thing, we'll talk about it, some of the women felt used. And I think some of that feeling comes from them being ignored in their skill set, in having a course set up for them. I just think that's part of it. Let's see. The par rate is just crazy. There's not a lot of green on this. There's so many pars. There were 0 birdies on hole 7. Yeah, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's like 6 holes where everybody took the same score. Now, since it wasn't birdie, nobody likes it. Waco. Where 6 to 8 of the holes at Waco all played with 60% above, had taken the same score. We're here. 6 holes, but it's par or worse. There's like, a couple bogeys in there where almost 60% of the field took a bogey over here. I think it's very obvious what one's going to be the hardest hole, but we'll look at the easiest hole was a 320-foot. It was the same hole as the MPO. And I don't even think FPO necessarily had a different I could be wrong, but I don't think they had a different... No, they didn't have a different tee, so the same hole played the easiest. Makes sense. But since it is a weird little 320-foot backhand, 70% of the field parred it. This is just not the pretty... Like, when you have this many people just playing par, I don't love it. Shows scoring separation issues. In a perfect world, you have like a, 40, 30, 30 split on, par, bogey, and birdie. Did round one play that bad? Okay, so round one, I think the weather was a little better. Hold on. Oh, different holes played easier. Okay. 320 feet versus... Then the other day, there's that 290-foot par 3 where 30% of the field took a birdie, 60% took a par, which I don't love. It's a lot of pars. A lot of pars where most people can kind of just lay up and do their own thing. Hardest hole, obviously, but I want to see what the second hardest hole, because that's more telling. Okay, second hardest hole for FPO was the big par 5 that kind of looped around. It was a lot of weird placement shots, and if you hit a tree early at that Mando, it was a rough going to get down the field. So the FPO was red par 4. So yeah, if you didn't make it past that Mando, and I saw plenty of people not make it past that Mando, you were scrambling for par, and good chance you're taking a bogey because you're probably going to hit another tree down the fairway. They did not... I'm just curious. If I click birdie, does it tell me who got the birdie? Bummer. I know I can find it other ways. I was just curious if it was on this page. That would have been too easy, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? We already went through these stats. I'm curious to who played this course the best. Rebecca Cox looks like she might have played it best. Who had the most fairway hits? Holland had the most fairway hits at Sprinkle, and Tee to Green, Hannah Blumroos, Rebecca Cox, Rebecca Dawn, Holland Hanley all had the best at Sprinkle. Okay. That I could see. Hole 11 at Sprinkle Valley is such a tricky angle on the turn. Yes, it is. And I can kind of show you guys what he's talking about. That has been on YouTube. Yeah, that second shot is so strange, especially because it plays so different for FPO. Because the MPO, some of them can just lay up to this. Can you see my mouse? Make sure you guys can see my mouse before I just start saying stuff for no reason. Yes, you can see my mouse. Okay, so this corner right here, the MPO, they could cut it. They could throw a forehand around the corner, almost lay up to in the trees over here, and then throw a spike hyzer to, I don't want to say island, to the peninsula. So the guys, it almost played more simple because of that. So FPO, they didn't really have that option unless you somehow got around to this outside and then elected to take the wide hyzer. And I don't know if I saw anybody do that. It's spooky because you could hit a tree, roll out. I think they had railroad ties up there at the circle. So that one's tough. I think it's a decent hole, but I think it could be averaged out a little bit better. 60% of the field taking a par. I don't love that many people taking a par in a hole. And again, before I start my spiral, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the other course first. Where are we at? Hole 1. There we go. Cool. Some of the changes they made to the course this year, Harvey Pinnock, were just okay. Hole 1 was interesting. Hole 2, I actually like hole 2 better. So I think maybe that was a worthy change. I didn't love they said the platform was a little funky. The one they stood on and threw off of was a little I thought hole 1's island was a little this is a great hole 15, 16, 17 because there's more pressure to this island, where a lot of the guys were kind of just like, okay, I'm going to throw it. Excuse me, ladies. And it applies to both, where a lot of them were, okay, I can just throw my stock, whatever. It would be 260-foot shot for the ladies and be close and make a putt. So that's why 37% of the field, this is good scoring separation though. 37% of the field had a birdie, 37% had a par, 26% had a bogey. That's pretty good scoring separation, especially at the elite level. So let's see what played as did we already do this? No, we haven't. Okay. So FPO, the easiest hole was hole 13, which is interesting. This is another one of the changes. This was maybe, it was either a year or 2 years ago, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, where Eagle threw the grenade and hit the cameraman. This was that hole, except it was a par 5, I think, and they went like 3 hyzers around the corner into the woods. So I think it's an interesting change. I do think it makes hole 14 better, though. Let me check 14. 60% birdies. Hold on. Hole 14. They made hole 14 harder. So yeah, 14, it's the same green, like they had you play around the woods. And then, so like over here, this right side that's OB, right? Here is old 13's like second fairway. So just an interesting change. Not bad. I think the scoring separation 1944, 1919 is pretty good, especially, for FPO. I think this was a much better FPO course. Clearly only 3 holes had 60% more of the field play have the same score. And like, just look at the difference and look at all those pars. That's for FPO round 2. And that was the worst weather day. Here, I'll do this. Round 1, look at all those pars, and then look at like the birdie rates versus like the bogey rates didn't really change that much. It doesn't look like a little bit, but like there's so many more pars at at Sprinkle Valley versus Harvey Pinnock, which is where they finished. Let's see. We already talked about easiest hole. Let's talk about the hardest hole at Sprinkle Valley. Was this really weird double mando hole 6. Not a bad hole, short par 4, 535 feet. Tough with 50% of the field taking bogey or worse. 48%, excuse me, bad math. Not bad though. Not bad. Especially for a hard hole. I think having a hard hole's, you should. But only 7% birdie's rough. But that was a tough fairway. 535 feet where it's 2 really specific placement shots to get yourself a birdie's. It was tough. And the OB rate. That had no OBs from ladies that final round. That's crazy. Most of the OB holes came from hole 11, which makes sense. This is that like really skinny. This is very similar to a hole at Eagles Crossing. Hole 1 now, because I forgot they've changed the way Eagles Crossing works. But hole 1, it's a very similar like hyper specific peninsula, which I don't love. This is very, we modified a ball golf course to play it type of hole. But I don't think having 1 or 2 of these is necessarily bad. It is a lot of artificial OB. Maybe they could have shaped it a little bit better with the way the greens are cut, so it's a little more specific on visuals. Because this way is it's a little arbitrary. They just like cut the golf green in half in order to attempt to make a compelling disc golf hole. But hole 6 played 0.6 over par. Okay. Cool. And we'll talk about MPO's stats over here at Harvey Pinnock. Sorry, I'm going a little bit out of order. I think we did talk about it. Sorry, I didn't sleep much last night. But yep. Okay, we did talk about that. Cool. I just said I didn't sleep much. Now we start the spiral, okay? The spiral. Okay. RV Pinnock, hole 18. Let me talk about it from a more general take than just FPO, because FPO is clearly where there were problems, and I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. Hole 18 at Harvey Pinnock clearly needs changed for FPO and MPO. I think the stock hyzer, it's almost like too easy of shots for MPO, and then maybe not the clearest. Like it, the big thing you have to keep in mind is for MPO, like it's a little bit tighter of a group for how far people can throw. They're just less accurate for the most part. And then FPO, there's a much wider range on how far people can throw from like top to midfield. So like the top player to the 50th player are very different. You can even say top 5 versus bottom 5 of the top 50 are very different in FPO, where, I mean, this weekend, Simon, Eagle, Germ all didn't make cash, which is something I should talk about. So you have to look at them completely different on who your target demographic is for a course. I think they're slowly learning that you can't just go in and change a par or completely swap a hole entirely and say, or excuse me, and just add a short tee pad or add a short basket and call it an FPO hole. Works sometimes. It does not work very often. And you have to be a really good course designer to make that work in a proper way. I have to be diplomatic. I'm really trying to make sure I have my thoughts together. All right, let's just go to it. Talk about it on MPO. Now, like I said, clearly, I'll pull it up so you guys can see it. And I need to pull up, where's he at? Disc Golf Course Maps on Twitter. He's the best. Course Maps? I have to pull up his Custom Course Maps is his name. He has genuinely the most like informational maps in disc golf, as on the way he uses like real topographical data to pull information. Let me pull this tab over here. Whoop. Okay, that was not as seamless as I had hoped. Boop, boop. Okay, so this is a way better. Hi, this is you can see my conversations. Who cares? Hi, that's me on Twitter. This is a much more accurate interpretation of what the hole looks like. And these are great informational tools. I appreciate the elevation profile. There's courses that have this on their signs. I think it's important, especially at courses where elevation is more prevalent. Like here in Indiana, there's not a lot of elevation changes, so it's not really that useful. Like, oh, there's 2 feet of elevation change, like not that prevalent. But here, where it's 30 feet uphill total, is an interesting thing to keep in mind, where you're like, oh, it's only an 865-foot par 5. Well, it's also uphill 30 feet. And that's why I like custom course map stuff so much, is it really shows specifically what is going on these things. Now, we're talking MPO. I'm just talking MPO for now. MPO is a very stock 400-foot hyzer, which the majority of pros have. Obviously, wind can change that. I don't think there was a ton of OB strokes on that first shot for MPO. But I just think it's boring. I shove them over in the woods, make them throw out of a gap or something, and get rid of the weird OB there in the opening. Or maybe there's a reason. There totally could be a reason they couldn't. I know there's that weird hill over on the left, as you can tell by the weird little squigglies over here. You can see that it goes uphill along these little areas. So maybe that's not always doable. The railroad ties were an attempt at something like to make it interesting. I don't think it looked bad. It was a little gimmicky. I almost would have preferred they just kept that in bounds and spread those railroad ties out a little bit more to maybe force a little bit more shot shaping and variation, because the problem became that Aaron Gossage said it really well. Everybody's going to throw the same shot on hole one. So why don't you just move the tee pad up there? Like, you're not really filtering out or making everybody score worse. Like, everybody can throw a 350 to 400 foot hyzer on tour, and that's it. Everybody's basically playing from there. So just make it a par four. Move it up there and make it a par four. That's one. Like, I don't love the first half of the hole. What I like about this hole, and I have to get this out of the way before I go on my rant any farther. What I like about this hole is that it really forces a player to figure out if they're playing for birdie or for bogey. We had multiple people both rounds take very, very what looked like routine birdies. Like, for a pro male, you had to throw a 350 to 400 foot hyzer, and then you had to throw a 300 foot, basically a par 3 to get to your landing zone, and then you had to throw a 175 foot shot to the island. All of those would be very overly easy par 3s on the course. But the second you par one of those par 3s, you have to figure out how you're playing for bogey. And that's not something you see very often on Pro Tour. Most pros, I think, approach this mindset of, okay, if I can't birdie, you have to par, you're going to lose strokes. Well, that's not the case. Obviously, we saw that it played like 2 strokes over par, 1.8 strokes over par. So a bogey's not a big deal. Simon showed that you can play the hole really routinely, take that OB stroke, lay up your putt, and that's it. I don't love that the bullseye has OB in it. That like island, I know what they're trying to go for, a little bit of drama on hole 18, but if it's not the last course of the tournament, who cares, I guess, is maybe a better way to put it. Oh my, could you imagine if they had to go to a playoff on this hole and they just made them play this hole on a loop? That'd be so funny. Okay, I really like the second shot of this hole, where it's from 400 feet here to this landing zone. It's like a 300-ish foot, 275 foot-ish shot where it had like pretty defined gaps. And if you hit one of the trees early, you could lay up to that, your ideal zone. Or what more people should have done, even if you're slightly out of position, just blast a backhand, do the Simon at, do the Simon at D-Glow hole 16 or whatever that was, and just blast it over the OB in the back, break the hole, get to your drop zone, and take your par if you had to lay it up and can't take your birdie. That'd be a double bogey. But, sorry. So you'd be throwing 1 to your layup, 2, and then you had to pitch up for your layup, excuse me. So you're throwing 3 from your layup. You blast it over, 5, 6. So you'd take a 6 if you had to lay it up and blast it over the back, which, who cares? That's not that big, like, it's pretty routine. Anybody who was taking anything over like these like 4 like quad bogeys and stuff just mismanaged it entirely. FPO and MPO. This, again, what I like about this hole is that it forces you to play for birdie or for bogey, which is so different than what we see. It forces, okay, play your high percentage shot. And if your high percentage is to take a bogey, do it. Sorry, I got yelled at because I'm at an hour. If your high percentage shot is to take a bogey, take a bogey. That's fine. Minimize damage. Make the strokes up elsewhere. I like the idea of a hole, not necessarily this hole. As I've mentioned, things need changed. I like the idea of a hole making people play high percentage for birdie or for bogey. Simon was playing his high percentage birdie. He got unlucky and skipped it over the back because he juiced it a little bit hard. And he still took a routine bogey. And he didn't lose strokes on the field, I don't think. So that's my opinion on that hole 18 for MPO especially. Let's talk about FPO. Kristen averaged like 6 16, 11 over on one hole. So in 2 days, hole 18, she she was 11 over par on 2 holes. Again, I'm basically a stand for Kristen. She can do no wrong. She's one of my favorite players of all time. She just played it too aggressively. And that's how she's always been hyper aggressive. And this hole punished the people who were aggressive and didn't hit their percentages. Does that make it a bad hole? I don't think so. I just really truly believe that I think for the top 20 girls, this is a decent hole that was played poorly. I don't think it's a great hole for the rest of the field. So FPO, I can't quite pull it up, but I can more or less do some dummy math. So FPO is about 80 feet shorter than MPO, and that's the only difference. That's the only difference between the 2 holes, which is another, like, why? Make it different. Like, force them, like, throw the T-pad up here, like, at this 250 foot mark, and make them choose whether or not they're going to try to juice a 375 foot shot to this gap for an easy approach shot, or if they just have to lay up. Like, at least you're creating a little bit of dichotomy there, and everybody's not throwing the same shot. Now, Two Hot Geese, I think is what their name on Jomez is. I could be saying that wrong, which would be embarrassing. They ripped on this course, but they ripped on this hole while Kristen fell apart on it. And that's the part that didn't make any sense. If we were showing someone play the hole, I would love to see them try to have that same conversation while Miss Frisbees really routinely birdied it with super straightforward shots. They weren't even perfect. They were just very straightforward shots. Miss Frisbees, I cannot remember her real name, and I feel terrible for it. Miss Frisbees took a pretty great birdie on this hole. I would love to see the Jomez girls talk about that over that, instead of when Kristen made 3 incredibly blatant mistakes and they just ripped on the hole. They couldn't articulate why it was bad hole design, other than, oh, the best in the world's taking an 11. Well, the best in the world just played it poorly because she is so used to being able to birdie absolutely everything. She didn't realize that you could take a bogey, and it's totally okay, and there's plenty of safe ways to play for bogey on this hole. Some things I think need changed. I don't love the tee shots for both of them. I don't necessarily love the blind island, but Mint Discs came out and said why they had to do it that way. Because if it's bad weather, you can't have people playing from the stairs, and then that like bowl up here, the last 100 feet, holds water, and you can't have people there. Chantel Badinsky, thank you very much, Ben. You're the best. That's Miss Frisbees. And I'm sorry if there's a big delay on YouTube, Ben. Let me know if it's gnarly. So I understand, like, this was they said, Mint said in their original video that this was the original idea for this hole, was this layout, which is crazy. Ben, you the best. Which is insane. This is so hard, but I love it. I love what this hole forces players to do. And back to Kristen. So Kristen throws OB on this hole. If you were to put a basket at that like 350 foot mark and told Kristen to hit it, she could do it most of the time. So the fact that she sailed I think it was a grace, OB to the right, that's mistake number 1. She then kind of goofed her layup, or she didn't quite hit her gap, to get up there. Her then layup did not put her in an optimal position to throw the best shot at that blind green. So there's 3 very clear mistakes. Here, I'll give you a 4th mistake Kristen made. Instead of laying up, she definitely could have hit that gap with a just normal little, it would have been a 225 foot backhand. She absolutely, heard something. There was a 225 foot backhand she could have thrown instead of laying up, blasted it over the back, laid it up. Now, would she have taken a double bogey? Yeah. But is a 7 better than 11? I think so. Again, no shade at Kristen. It's just disheartening to see two girls rip on a course and a hole on it like adds insult to injury to the course designer, because it's like, yeah, you're ripping on it. You're watching the best in the world throw 3 not good shots, and it got in her head. It's a bummer. I have to real quick shout out Inland Disc Golf. Buddies of mine from Indianapolis, IN. They collab with people, get shirts printed out. Go check them out. So that's my big feelings on hole 18 at Sprinkle Valley, is the idea. I love that a hole can make a player play for par, a lot of P's, and it's not the smart play. Like, the smart play is a birdie, and if you mess up your birdie attempt, you just default and go to a bogey, and that's okay. It's not something we see very often. I hope we see it more often. We do actually see it often. It's just this hole, the way it's kind of laid out specifically, par is hard. Sorry, I was going to say, Mint deleted that Reddit post, which is really weird, about them explaining their ideas. And like, I'm wondering if people would still have the same complaints about this hole had the weather been bad, because there is zero excuse for anybody to take a triple bogey round 2 or something when you know that the hole was playing 2.5 strokes over par. Take that bogey, get off the course. Fantastic point, Clinton. And sorry, I'll summarize up why I don't like this hole necessarily. I do like the hole because of what it makes a player do and what it forces a player to try. It really punishes the aggressive people who are off their game just a little bit, but it favors the people who know their game better. And quite frankly, any professional on earth, had we put a tee pad right at the, like, before the stairs and just made it a 200-foot blind island shot, I don't think it would play as the hardest hole in the course. I think this hole is really just 3 combined par 3s that if you didn't birdie all of those par 3s, you just said, okay, and you accepted your bogey on the entire hole, which I think is neat. I actually like that a lot. I don't like the tee shot, wide open, hyzer for everybody. Just put the tee pad up there if you're going to make them do that. I don't like the weird little railroad ties. It kind of just forces everybody to play to the left, which is fine, I guess. Like I said, if you're trying to force everybody to play to the left, just put a tee pad over there and make the hole shorter. I don't think, other than Kristen goofing out of bounds, I don't think a lot of people messed that up. The stairs are rough. I'm sure that was like a pre-existing thing with the course, or a reason, because that's like a bowl. You can see it on this little overview. Again, shout out Custom Course Maps. And I don't really like that they put the basket in bullseye of OB. I'm wondering if, another thing I didn't like necessarily, I think they had marshals on it, where at the front of the tee box, they had marshals standing on the corners. That way they could raise a flag, say whether or not you crossed in bounds or not, which is fine, but that's just weird in a game where everything is kind of up to the players for the most part. And then all of a sudden we have this one spot on this course where it's like not up to the players. So I don't love that. Maybe there's a way to adjust that in a little bit smarter way. But I think all of the shots to get to a birdie are absolutely executable. If you don't nail one of those shots, you say, okay, I'm going to play for a bogey or double bogey, depending on where and how bad you messed up. Because if you mess up your tee shot, just probably accept you're going to take a double bogey, because any professional should be nailing that tee shot. I wanted to show, did he have his... Okay, here's the elevation profile. I don't know if that helps some people, but these are the railroad ties right here on the far left. So it shows kind of how uphill. This is a 5-foot berm. But I think depending on where you are, you could kind of see the top of the basket. But again, since the basket's up against the OB, a little weird. And then here's the final area of the hole. Like I said, there's this bowl that they didn't want people to play out of, because if it's rainy, it gets disgusting. And then the stairs are literally unsafe if they're not playing from there. So I think they're going to make adjustments. I'm wondering if the DGPT, it'd be kind of funny to see the DGPT just go, we're never playing this course again. Even though I didn't see a lot of complaints last year. But that, for the most part, I think wraps up my feelings on hole 18. It was really weird to see this big of a reaction from everybody, but it was fun to see in a way that's like, this is something new to the game that we don't see very often. Yeah, people complain about holes being too hard, but this was a very specific, people complained but couldn't quite articulate why. And I think if they understood why, they could help improve versus just complaining. But I don't necessarily think that Sprinkle Valley played very well for FPO anyways. I think it needs a lot of adjustments, which is, like I said, it's just weird because they played it. FPO played it last year. I didn't think it went too bad. Just a fun comparison. Par at Harvey Pinnock, par at Sprinkle Valley was, what are we going to call it? What was ratings? I need to check. Oop. Nobody okay, so par was basically 1,010 rated for Sprinkle versus at Harvey Pinnock, par was 980 rated. So about 4 strokes harder ish, 4 to 5 strokes harder, which is a lot, especially when you play in one, you turn around, you go and play the next. Oh, and another quick thing, like, I know a lot of people complain about these temp ball golf courses, and I don't love the fact that it's temporary either. But I saw a lot of professionals talking about how they liked the way this ball golf course was done. They compared certain holes to North of Black. They compared certain holes to W.R. Jackson, which is great. So I think this actually might be one of the better temporary courses, even though I don't love that it's temporary. Clinton said, what if they made the island bigger off of the back end so that they can land and not take an OB stroke going long and just have to throw back? They could. I don't think that's a bad idea. I actually prefer the idea that you put the island, or it's the, like, yeah, you could expand the island, of course. That's obviously a valid thing. Maybe like make it more of a teardrop shape, or a big long rectangle island would be interesting, but I just don't like the basket being that close to the OB. Oh, that was the other. Oh, sorry. Back when I said Krista made 3 glaring mistakes, one of them was throwing her putt over the top of the basket on her drop zone. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff they could do to that hole. I think that's going to wrap up. Let me check my notes, make sure I didn't miss anything as far as things I wanted to talk about. I don't think so. Oh, I guess I do want to kind of talk about, I think this brought up an interesting point, or a thought, is that if I were to make my own ideal hole course for the Pro Tour, and I'm going to keep this vague, that because both ideals can kind of fit for MPO and FPO, and this is just kind of something for people to think about. I had it worded a little bit better on my Blue Sky. Let me check. Sorry, I should have had my notes ready. I apologize. But I had an idea on what I think the ideal disc golf hole is. Disc golf course is. And I apparently can't find it. I am bad at Googling. Sorry, I should have probably had this ready, but it's a fun little way to close out the podcast. 1 second. Almost there. This is part of the hiccups of producing and starring, air quote, starring in your own podcast. So you have to figure out how to fill air while you're also Googling things and searching for things at the same time. We'll get there. The goal is to make the podcast a little bit better every week. And this is part of it. I do think this went smoother than last time, even though I started a little bit late. But that was YouTube's fault, not mine, as odd as that is. Okay, I think I'm just going to not make it up, but okay, off the top of my head, I'm just going to go for it. My ideal course would have like 3 par 5s, 7 or 8 par 4s, 7 or 8 par 3s. And then you vary the difficulty as in hard, medium, soft for all of them. So you'd have like a hard par 5, medium par 5, easy par 5, where you like just kind of figure out your birdie percentages more or less. And you do the same thing on your pars and your same thing on your par 4s and your same thing in your par 3s. And you vary the distance and shot shape and all that. I was just thinking from a scoring separation, I really want to see a course like that where it's you have all of them, but they all have much like way more varying difficulties. And that's what, so some of you don't know, I am designing and installing my own disc golf course with my Muncie Area Disc Golf League club. It is in Henry County. It will go at Memorial Park just north of Newcastle, right off Interstate 70. So it'll be like an hour east of Indianapolis, about an hour and a half from Cincinnati, and an hour south of Fort Wayne. About an hour and a half south of Fort Wayne. But it's on State Road 3. And I'm John Houck, the number 1 course designer in the world. I've been paying a lot of attention to him, and we're on like a first name basis. I've really paid attention to his teachings and stuff over the past like 3 or 4 years. And what I want, like he said, this property like has the chance to be like an FPO or an MPO level course, like an FPO or a master's level course. But the parks department didn't want to go through and clear out all the stuff for galleries, which is understandable. It is a memorial park. So I'm still wanting to put in that like master's difficulty level course or FPO level difficulty course. So like MA1, really MA1 is what we're aiming for because we have some really easy courses nearby. We have some really great intermediate courses nearby. We lost one of our difficult courses. It's like pending under construction because the city's redoing a bunch of stuff. But I'm trying to put in this like difficult course, and it's a mixture of woods and par golf. So I'm going to try to take that mindset of, okay, I need 30% to be easy, 30% to be medium, and 30% to be hard holes for what an MA1 player is. And that's just what I was getting to on that. And that's where that thought experiment came up, was like, okay, because I have the course mostly designed, but how do I kind of wedge it in directions where I have certain amount of par 4s, certain amount of par 3s, hopefully a couple par 5s. I don't know if I quite have the land to do 3 par 5s. That's almost 3,000 feet you need for par 5s, which is a lot. So we'll see. If you're not following me on my socials, I would appreciate it. We're going to be doing this hopefully every Tuesday at 9:30. I'll have post-production go up Wednesday mornings. I will have less to do post-producing now because unfortunately, I fixed my audio issue. Thanks for everybody in the live chat. That was fun seeing you guys hang out. And yeah, I don't know how to end these yet. Thanks for watching Disc Week News. I'll see you next week. Oh, wait. Will I see you next week? I won't see you next week because it's our off week. I might pop in if something crazy happens over the weekend and we'll do a shorty. But for the most part, this is going to be like a tour recap, Disc Week News type of podcast. And then in the off season, I'll probably do it bi-weekly. But yeah, thanks for hanging out, guys. Peace.